people maybe feed their dogs.
You bet.
Little pets, some delicious turkey, some table food, and that's a bad idea.
It is, and we're all guilty of doing it. Everybody I know is guilty of doing that. And I would say a little bit here and there is probably not a bad deal.
Okay, and by a little bit you mean?
Small portions, just like a teaspoon, tablespoon kind of a thing. However, it's all proportional. If you have a big lab and you give him a few French fries, that's not as bad as if you have like a little Itchy Bob 5-pounder and you give him a whole hamburger. It's just not the same. And we all have a tendency of being trained by our pets. And they're extremely skilled at this. You don't even know what's happening, and next thing you know, you're only feeding them turkey from Thanksgiving every day.
Well, that would get expensive too.
It would get very expensive. And so the couple issues we have with that is, one is just GI upset. We're coming into the wonderful holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that. And what we find on the veterinary side is we get the phone call in the morning, my dog got into the turkey and the house is a mess and there's all kind of horrible trouble with diarrhea, vomiting, things like that. And so that's where we run into problems over the holidays. So we see all the vomiting and diarrhea secondary to indulging in the wonderful pleasures of Thanksgiving. And so if they're on their regular dog food all the time, then you give them something new and rich like this, their GI tract just can't handle that.
That makes sense.
And so there's chaos going on there.
Now, is there any human food that's okay to feed your pets? If it's no, that's okay too.
Tricky question, but technically all the food not all the food, a lot of the food is okay. Because they're omnivore. Dogs are omnivores just like people, and cats are carnivores, so we all have similar kind of diets. The risk, the two complications. One is if they're only used to eating dog food and they get something different, that's where you have a problem. But things like chocolate, onions, garlic, those are definitely toxic to dogs and cats. And the other part is volume and consistency. If every morning you give your dog a few Cheerios and that's your routine and everybody's happy, then they can handle that.
Because they're used to it.
They're used to it. But if you go and give them a whole pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving, that's not going to work so well.
That makes us sick.
Exactly.
We're used to pumpkin pie.
Exactly.
Something else that I find interesting is you say it's very important that people know the ingredients in the dog food and the food that they're feeding their dogs, and they should look for the AAFCO, the AAFCO statement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is that? Where do we find it, and why is it important?
All right. The AAFCO is where to find it. This is a Hill Science Diet food, and the AAFCO statement is right down here below all the percentages and protein and things like that. And for example, this one says animal feeding test use AAFCO procedures and statements basically determine they did a food trial to see if this food actually substantiates what they say on the bag. And there's two forms to test the food. One is through food trials, and the other is through formulated. And basically formulated means that they sat on a computer, punched in all the ingredients, and spit out a food, and they didn't try it on the animals.
You're saying they need to see how the animals react.
Exactly. So when you go to the grocery store, if you want to do a mean trick on your husband, send him to the grocery store and tell him to buy a bag of dog food for your dog. And then when he calls you and say, which food do we feed you? You should say, we've had Itchy Bob for 8 years, you know, and then hang up. And then he's going to sit there dazed and confused. There's going to be wolves and elks and peas and carrots and salmon, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So first clue is AAFCO statement.
Got it.
If it has been formulated, you probably don't want to do it, but if they've done feeding trials, then that's probably a good starting point.
The feeding trials is what to look for.
Feeding trials is what to look for. And then ask your veterinarian.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff, and not so much deception, but words mean something. Like beef dinner versus dog food with beef flavor, or dog food with beef. That all means something totally different as far as ingredients, percentage, and things like that.
So if you have any questions, Texas Veterinary Hospitals, they have 3 locations, amazing doctors. If you're having any trouble with your pets, if you have questions, if you're looking for a new vet, this is where you need to go.